morning, everyone. Welcome to City Hall. Welcome to Council Chambers. And welcome to the meeting of the Los Angeles City Council for today, Wednesday, January 8th, 2003. The City Council meets every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. We're as close to it as possible. Meetings are open to the public, and we always invite the public to join us and participate in council proceedings. For members of the public unable to attend council meetings, we can also be viewed live from home on your cable station, Channel 35. We can be viewed live via webcast from the city's homepage or heard via council phone. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Bernson, Galanter, Garcetti, Gruel, Hahn, Holden, Labange, Misakowski, Pacheco, Perry, Reyes, Weiss, Stein, Padilla. 10 members present, a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. The council is officially in session. First order of business, please.
Approval of the minutes.
Ms. Perry moves and Mr. Weiss seconds.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Ms. Misakowski moves and Mr. Reyes seconds.
On the regular agenda, Mr. President, items 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1, 2, and 3 are items noticed for public hearing. There are ordinances relative to street lighting districts. I believe 12 council members are expected today. Do you wish to hold those on the desk?
We do expect 12 members today. Let's first acknowledge that I have not received cards from members of the public wishing to address the council on items 1, 2, and 3, so we shall deem the public hearings open and closed. In lieu of taking a vote on these items at this time, let's await 12 members present to be able to take 12 votes on these ordinances. So let's hold these on the desk, but close the public hearings. Next item.
Item number 4 is protest against proposed vacation in Council District 5. If there are no protests, Council should move to instruct the city engineer to proceed with the vacation.
Okay, and once again, I have not received requests from members of the public to address the council on item number 4. Mr. Weiss moves the recommendation. Is there any objection? Anybody wishing to call this matter special? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
That is approved. Next item, please.
Next items, Mr. President, items 5 through 8 are items for which public hearings have been held. I understand there's a letter from the applicant on item number 5 requesting a continuance for 1 week.
Okay, item number 5, member of the district, Mr. Reyes.
Yes, I'd like to continue number 5 for 1 week.
Okay, request to continue item number 5 for 1 week.
Yes.
New date being January 15th. Without objection, item 5 is continued. We have items 6, 7, and 8 remaining. Public hearings haven't been held in committee. A motion from the floor would be required to reopen the public hearing. Mr. Holden. Mr. Holden calls item number 8 special, leaving items number 6 and 7. Seeing no motion to reopen the public hearings, members wishing to call any further specials? Item 6 called special by Mr. Zine, leaving item number 7. Members wishing to call item number 7 special? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please open the roll on item number 7. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
That is approved. Next item, please.
Items for which public hearings have not been held, items 9 through 27.
Items 9 through 27 now before us. I have not received requests from members of the public to address the council on these items. We shall deem the public hearing satisfied. Members wishing to call any specials, items 9 through 27. Any specials? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please open the roll.
I'm sorry, Mr. President, items 9 through 14 are ords. Do you want to hold those on the desk?
Thank you very much. Let's hold all ordinances on the desk as we await the 12th member to arrive. Actually, Ms. Hahn is here now, bringing us the 12 members on the roster. So let's open the roll on items 9 through 27. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Those matters are approved. Let's return to the ordinances being held on the desk, items 1, 2, and 3. Please open the roll. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Those are approved. Next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, is the closed session, item number 28. Do you wish to hold that on the desk?
Let's hold closed session items on the desk. I do have speaker cards submitted on item 28, so we'll hear from members of the public before going into closed session. Next item.
Next item on the agenda is on the continuation agenda. Item number 29 was continued from yesterday, and it's regarding a street name change in Council District 5.
Mr. Weiss, Item number 29 is now before us. Did you wish to call this matter special, or do we have a resolution?
I have a resolution, but why don't I call it special so I can continue my conversation with Ms. Hahn?
Okay. 29 called special by Mr. Weiss. Next item.
Going back to the items called special, item number 6 was called special by Councilmember Zine.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President. Mr. President, colleagues, thank you. I just wanted to note on item number 6 that the local homeowners group was involved in this, and there were some problems, and all the problems were worked out, and I just wanted to acknowledge the homeowners organization, Helen Norman from Tarzana, that helped bring this to completion, and we do appreciate that, and we request a vote to affirm this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zine. Other members wishing to be heard? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Next item, please.
Item number 8 called special by Councilmember Holden.
Mr. Holden. May I ask you to press your button,
members,
please?
we should have some verbal report on this consent decree.
Do we have the relevant city staff here
Yeah, and I'll sit down.
on item number 8?
Barb Garrett from the CLA's office. This is just a regular status update on where we are with the consent decree. It was completed in December, and since that time, some of the items in the report have been completed, such as the posting of the pedestrian and traffic stop data, which occurred on Monday. In addition, there are actions in here highlighting upcoming events. One of the most significant being on February 1st, we are required to submit a semi-annual status report to the court. We are working on that and hope to have that to you in late January.
Item 2 is part of this report regarding the SEU, Special Enforcement Unit, supervisors on duty, problems occurring when they're not, officers not being properly supervised. Tell me something about this.
Good morning, Commander Dan Koenig from the Police Department Administrative Group. The Chief of Police has appointed Deputy Chief Mike Hillman as the department's gang coordinator, and he's been working very diligently to drill down into this, figure out exactly what's going on, how the SEU units are being utilized, supervised, and managed with respect to gang suppression activities. A large percentage of the monitor's concerns dealt with documentation. However, there were significant and legitimate concerns with respect to the deployment and supervision of gang units. We believe that has been corrected, and Deputy Chief Hillman will be is developing a plan to more fully integrate gang activities and SEU operations into gang suppression activities.
What is the duty of the Special Enforcement Unit? What do they do? What's the function?
I'm sorry, sir, it's hard to hear you.
What is the function of the Special Enforcement Unit?
The Special Enforcement Unit consists of 2 subcomponents. One is career criminal units, and the other is the gang unit at each of the 18 areas.
This report is supposed to be addressing also complaints.
I'm sorry, sir.
This report is also addressing complaints.
The monitor's report or the CLA's report?
This report I have here that says that LAPD consent decree status update.
Yes,
That's
sir.
what you're presenting to us. Is that not correct?
Sure.
As part of that report, on page 7, talks about processing complaints. Could you tell us about that?
Hold on.
We're on the same page, aren't we?
This is the 10-day requirement that the face sheet be at Internal Affairs within 10 days, and this shows the level of compliance during all those months. The last month was 96% compliance, 95 is minimum standard.
Compliance with the what?
With the requirement that the face sheet be at Internal Affairs within 10 days.
Okay, fine.
Physically.
Complaint sheets.
Yes, sir.
All right, fine.
The initial face sheet of the
Now,
complaint.
the commission took a position to change the complaint process, correct? All right, now, how do you think this could be affected in your report? Will it indicate that a large number of complaints are being made, or status quo,
There will be
a
no...
straight line, or it would be a reduction in the number of complaints? And how would you handle the notifying us if there's a reduction in the number of complaints?
There should be no appreciable reduction in the number of complaints. The change has to do with how the complaints are investigated, and most specifically allows the areas to deal quickly with routine-type complaints, like
What's a routine type complaint?
failing to qualify, failing to appear in court, that one-time momentary error that human beings make, where someone missed court.
I mean, if police officers miss court?
Sometimes they do. They forget. They screw their calendar up.
That's not what other ordinary people do. They're held to a different standard, you know. If they appear in court, they cite somebody, they get to appear to testify. It's a waste of the court's time and the harassment of the citizen.
And if an officer misses court, it's handled as a disciplinary matter.
That's the only kind of complaint that's been considered not so consequential?
There are other complaints that, for example, complaints that are clearly unfounded or exonerated at the time they're taken. A good example of that is a person will complain that the officer had no reason to search their house, but the officer has a valid search warrant. Clearly, there was a valid reason to search the house. Those types of complaints are disposed quickly under the new system.
Well, we have no way of tracking that type of complaint if those complaints are enumerated.
Every one of those complaints will continue to
and
get
the
a
reason
number.
why, I have
They
some
are.
concern with this change of receiving and responding to complaints, because the Crystal Commission clearly pointed out that because of the code of silence, keeping complaints inside the house at a local level, at the division or at the station, very often they were covered up. In fact, some of the citizens were intimidated, that the record shows that previously, and did not want to make complaints because of that.
Each and every one of these complaints, even if they're handled under the expedited process, will still be sent down to Internal Affairs, will still get a file number, will still be reviewed by the Inspector General. The only issue is the complexity of the investigation required to dispose of the complaint. There is nothing going in a drawer.
Nothing swept under the carpet.
Nothing's going into a drawer.
All right, we'll take a look at that. When will you have
Absolutely.
some numbers on that so I can look at it?
We haven't issued the order yet. We're finalizing the order. It should be issued within the week, and that is certainly one of the things we're going to be watching as it goes
Yeah,
along.
you and I should talk so we make sure we
Absolutely,
can take a
Councilman.
look at
Happy
it.
to.
Thank you. Bye.
Always, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Ms. Misikowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think some of the points that Mr. Holden highlighted are valid, and in particular, as we learned from this, the monitor's report that this is reporting on, there were some successes. Our auditing is going well. We are doing well in that area. We are hitting some of our deadlines, but we are also finding some issues. And one issue that I think was of concern is the supervision of the Special Enforcement Units, the SEU units. And as Commander Koenig has indicated, it became a very high priority of Chief Bratton. He has elevated Captain Hillman to Chief Hillman to address this issue, and I think in the next week or two we're going to start to see some of the plans and organizational changes to allow both the addressing of these issues, which is the gang issue and the increased crime that is correlated to that, but then the very important element of increased supervision of the officers and the units that are involved in that in those areas. So we will see the reaction to that. It was highlighted as a problem in the monitor's report. The chief has jumped on it quickly, and I think if you would like, Councilmember Holden, that Chief Hillman would be very happy to come over and talk to you about this strategy. Both, as I say, the hand-in-hand strategy, dealing with gang crime, dealing with gang issues, and dealing with the supervision of the police officers who are going to go out and deal with them, that the monitor indicated needed better, closer, tighter scrutiny. But so I think we always use these as bellwethers, as markers as to where we are going, where we need to create more emphasis, And I think it's useful as a guideline and a tool for the department in its implementation of the consent decree to recognize the strides we are making, that the regularization of audits, the comfort with audits that we are now having, the ability of the police department that will go on in the future to do this, to manage and monitor where the hot spots are and where the problems are, and also where we need more work. And this is one where we do need more work, and that was what was acknowledged as being deficient and getting a response. In fact, just yesterday, Chief Hillman addressed the Police Commission as a response to that, which is what this report asked for, and we will have that report coming back to the council to address it, as well as the overall organizational strategy.
Mr. Holden.
Let me just basically say that I was rather embarrassed or shocked reading the paper today about some of the individuals who were stopped profiling. People who are managers of businesses, managers of stores. It tantamounts to being harassed. And this is a fine police department. You got a few apples out there who can really make it look bad. Those kind of articles do not help the image of the Los Angeles Police Department, in my view. And so if those complaints had been filed, they would have been handled at a very local level, and nothing would have been said about it or done about it. But it's important and it's serious enough to be written about in the newspaper, and that's when it hurts the most. We have to send a message. We have to have a policy in place, which we don't have in place, how to address these issues. Not to stop somebody by the way they look, what kind of clothes they wear. They all wear the same clothes. They all look the same. You can't do that. So it's not some subjective mental exercise used by individuals as they choose. You have to have rules, regulations, standards, guidelines. We don't have that in place. And studies are not going to help it. Get it in place. So that's the reason why I raise these issues. We have to make the department look good as it is. It is one of the best, but my God, a few guys can make it look real bad. And you read about it in the newspaper. That's what we don't want to have.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Other members wishing to be heard on this item? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please open the roll, please close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, item number 29, call special by Councilmember Weiss.
Mr. Weiss.
Mr. President, we reached a resolution on this matter. I don't know if staff from Public Works is here. She was here yesterday. I really appreciate what you did. The gentleman in this matter has agreed to pay the full cost of the city. The full cost the city will incur in naming this street. So I'd like to move to amend this matter to require the gentleman to do just that and direct your department, which I know is going through an audit of the actual costs here, to do a full accounting of how much it costs to rename streets in this matter, so that we can then to present that material to the city attorney and direct the city attorney by way of this motion now to draft an ordinance to change the fee so that the fee will represent what the city's full and actual costs are to do this sort of work. It's my understanding, and I think you provided this to me in an email, that this fee hasn't been changed since 1982, so it's long overdue. That's my motion, and with that, we'll have a resolution and we'll have a full payment for the renaming of this street. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Weiss has made a motion. Is there a second? Ms. Mizikowski seconds. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please open the roll on Mr. Weiss's amending motion. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Now let's open the roll on the matter as amended. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Next item, please.
This is the time for comments from the public on items not on council's agenda.
Okay, we have one card for general public comment today. Ms. Lucia Miller, if you can come forward at this time. Ms. Miller? Yes.
Council members and President Padilla, I come to you as one of the families in Playa del Rey who have been soundproofed by the Airport Soundproofing Bureau, and my daughter and I lived in the same house for 6 years, very healthy. I was a fitness instructor before. Now we have 16 different toxic molds in our blood. It's been 2 years we've been untreated. We lost everything we own. I've gone to City Council, Ms. Makowski, for help. She says they're investigating. 2 years of watching your child deteriorate and lose everything. She's homeschooling. She's very, very ill, and so am I. And nobody's doing anything about it. And this happened because we got the free doors and windows, and it suffocated us. I'm asking for help.
Okay, thank you. We have your name and contact information here, and I see an acknowledgement from the council member that we'll get somebody to assist you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. This concludes public comment for today's meeting. Madam Clerk, next item.
Mr. President, do you wish to clear the desk before going into closed session?
Yes, please, and then we do have speaker cards on our closed session item today, so let's clear the desk rather quickly. Mr. Weiss?
Yeah, I would like to be recognized before we hear the speaker cards on item 28, the closed session item, and I'd like to have a discussion about the reasons we're going into closed session and the parameters for the closed session.
Okay, we'll do that. Madam Clerk, let's clear the desk first.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Motion shall be posted and referred.
There are excuses on the desk. Councilmember Galante requests to be excused Wednesday, January 29th for personal business that meets council policy.
Ms. Galanter is excused.
Councilmember Perry requests to be excused Tuesday, January 14th to leave at 11:30 for city business. That also meets council policy.
Ms. Perry is excused.
And that clears the desk for closed session.
Okay, item number 28 is now before us. Mr. Weiss requests to be heard prior to hearing from members of the public. I do want to acknowledge that we have a colleague from the city of Signal Hill and one of our colleagues from the city of Rosemead with us. Mr. Weiss.
And I would request, I guess I would suggest to the folks from Heal the Bay and Baykeeper, why don't you fill out a comment card so that now would be the time for you to address
I have the cards as well.
You have their cards?
I just want to
Good.
acknowledge the elected officials in the audience.
Didn't understand what you were doing. Colleagues, I would ask that you, if you can, take a few moments to listen to the representatives from Baykeeper and Heal the Bay who are going to address us in a few moments before we go into closed session. The closed session item has to do with a request, as I understand it, from the City Department and from the City Attorney to file a lawsuit to turn back the clock in the area of clean water and environmental protection. I strongly believe we should not turn back the clock, and today we have a choice. We have a very significant choice in this city today, whether we are going to fight for clean water in our bays, or whether we are going to fight for the right legally to pollute them. That's the choice that we are being presented with today. Please listen to the representatives from the environmental groups who have made, I believe, very persuasive presentations so far. I know Mr. Garcetti agrees with me that they've made very persuasive presentations to this council so far. To date, this council, I believe, has not done the right thing. But today we have a chance to change city policy, change it for the better, change it in the direction of environmental protection. Please listen to them and then make up your minds later. I would like to ask the representatives, though, who want to make a closed session presentation to come forward so we can have a discussion about the parameters of what we would be talking about in closed session.
Okay, I have Mr. Holden and Ms. Sikowski on the queue. Members, are you wishing to be heard before hearing from members of the public? Because what I would rather do is proceed with our public comment. Mr. Holden, can we proceed with public comment?
Public comments first, then I'll
Okay.
speak.
Thank you very much.
And point of order, I
Council.
believe, and I agree, that if we have the public comment, I see no reason why we can't begin the discussion in public. And if a question is asked of the city attorney or a question is asked of any of the city people who will be at the table, which they feel then might lead us to go into closed session, we could. But I would move that we begin the discussion, have the public comment, and begin our discussion and presentation in open session.
I second
Thank
that
you,
motion.
Ms.
Thank you
Sikowski.
for that motion.
Let's proceed with public comments and then hear from our city attorneys first and get their advice on how to proceed with the conversation. A balance that will be in open session and a balance that will be in closed session. The council calls for it at this time from the city of Signal Hill, Councilmember Larry Forrester. Thank you for being with us. Followed by Councilmember from the city of Rosemead, Margaret Clark, Leslie Mintz, Mark Gold, and Steve Fleischle.
Mr. President, council members, I'd like Margaret Clark to go first if she may. She has another meeting to attend for the League of California Cities and has to be out of here in about 10 minutes, so I'll defer to her first.
Okay, Ms. Clark.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Larry. I'm Margaret Clark, council member from the city of Rosemead, and we are here to ask that you do join with the other cities who are filing the lawsuit. And the reason is from an environmental standpoint, because I am on several environmental committees at the local, state, and national level. And we feel that these regulations are piecemeal, they are not good, based on good science, and therefore we're going to be throwing scarce, precious environmental dollars at it without getting the results. We want clean water. We do not want to turn back the clock on the environment. We're the last people that want to do that, and yet everyone knows there's only so much money that the public is willing to spend on the environment. And in bad times like we're in this state, the environmental dollars are the first to go, unfortunately. And I would just beg you, this is so important that we not waste the money throwing it down a rat hole and not getting the results we want. So please join us in this lawsuit to get the right regulations and the right means of cleaning up this water. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. President, council members, Larry Forrester, council member of the City of Signal Hill, Coalition for Practical Regulation Steering Committee. I have given the clerk a handout for you, have a memo that I've written on the subject, and basically would like to enter it into the record. Basically, the State Water Board denied our petition to review this permit without even hearing a meeting, excuse me. What this particular MPDS study or permit does is it puts on us new and unfounded mandates, which we in the state feel exceed the current state and federal laws. Please take into consideration several items. One, the permit is written to require that we treat stormwater much like wastewater. And to implement the stormwater consent decree, the cities were not even invited to participate in that decree. We believe that the expense of stormwater treatment will be triggered by receiving water limitations clause of the permit and numeric standards for TMDLs. The cities have already been placed on preliminary notice by the regional board that all regional major water bodies currently exceed quality water standards. The permit contains inadequate definition of maximum extent practical, and there are no cost benefits requirements on the regional board when they impose these new regulations on the cities. The permit will mandate unworkable water quality standards, such as fishing, swimming, and drinking water standards for all flood control channels and major drainage tributaries, what I call eatable, drinkable, swimmable for the LA River in its flood control areas. The NPDS permit will expose cities to regional board daily fines, the way it's written, from third parties, in the amount of as much as $31,000 a day or $945,000 a month. That's almost $1 million a month in penalties if you don't meet these, quote, numeric limits. I must also reference a recent document by the EPA which gave guidance for the MPDS permits and said they should be in the form of best management practices, and that numeric limits will be used only in rare instances. I feel that the EPA policy recognizes that because stormwater discharges are due to stormwater events that are highly variable in frequency and duration and are not easily characterized, only in rare cases will it be feasible or appropriate to establish numeric limits for municipal stormwater discharges. Therefore, the EPA believes that in these situations, permit limits typically can be expressed in BMPs, best management practices, and that numeric limits will be used only in rare instances. We ask, What makes the Los Angeles County NPDES permit that rare instance that we're using numeric limits? With inadequate legal safe harbor and no working definition of MEPs, we have no course but to say we need to get rid of these numeric limits and go with best management practices. We all care about the environment, and we're 100% in favor of cleaning up the Los Angeles rivers and its various tributaries and other water bodies. But at this point, as Councilwoman Clark has so well said, with the limited dollars we have and the current studies that have been done, and the environmentalists will refute them, the Caltrans study, except it's done by Brown and Root or Brown and Caldwell, one of the top water resource engineering firms in the country, estimates $54 billion when all of these are installed over the next 10 to 12 years. We feel there is more practical ways of looking at these and approaching them, and from that standpoint ask for the legal courts to do what the state should have done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Forrester. Leslie Mintz is our next speaker, followed by Mark Gold, Steve Fleischle, and Dennis Dickerson.
Happy New Year, Council. I'm Leslie Mintz, attorney for Heal the Bay. I've heard that you're being encouraged to sue because you need a seat at the table. That, I believe, on a practical level, is a misconception. Other attorneys have chosen to sue, and they're going to put forward your legal arguments and not on your dime. The county and CPR do not want to settle. In this regard, a seat at the table is a further misconception. There will be no settlement. They erroneously believe that they will win in court. If they had wanted to settle, they would have done so in the over a year of negotiations that we've all been through. More importantly, on a policy level, the statement that you need a seat at the table is fundamentally flawed because it presumes that a legal fight is justified. It is not. You must choose what your legacy will be. Either you will act progressively and move forward with the permit, or you will delay and defer. We believe in you and your leadership of the city. The environmental community believes that we can work together to gather the necessary resources. We have appeared before you to recite statistics about how bad the pollution problem is. Just this past December 18th, first storm week brought 26 tons of trash in 1 week to Venice and Playa Vista beaches alone. We have also pointed you to the fact, with constituent testimony from every district and results at the polls, that Los Angelinos want clean water and a strong permit. We've given you samples of the thousands of letters asking for your help. We have told you our perspective about the permit, that it incorporates an iterative process for compliance and that it is equitable. We urge you, do not let your environmental policy be driven by litigious, reactive fear of a third-party lawsuit. Choose the rule of progress over the exception of a lawsuit and leave a legacy of cooperation.
If I can ask you to conclude, please. Okay. Mr. Gold.
Good morning, council members. My name is Dr. Mark Gold, the Executive Director of Heal the Bay. For a point of clarification, I do want to let everybody know there is no stormwater consent decree. I really have no idea where Councilman Forster came up with that idea. This stormwater permit was approved 13 months ago and was the result of more than 1 year of negotiations. So it was not some fly-by-night thing that was thrown together. The environmental community in the state took the unprecedented step to have good faith negotiations for the last year to come up with narrow modifications to the permit. Unfortunately, these negotiations did not result in consensus, much to our dismay. This permit is no different on the language your staff is most concerned about than the language that has already existed in the Long Beach stormwater permit for the last 3 years and the Ventura County stormwater permit for the last 2.5 years. So this is not something new with a precedent for the Los Angeles region. It already exists in Long Beach, already exists in Ventura County. If you want polluted neighborhoods, alleys, and lots strewn with trash, then go ahead and sue the state. If you want to support polluted beaches, streams, and lakes, then go ahead and sue the state. If you want continued contention between the public, the environmental community, and the city, go ahead and sue the state. If you want to join the herd and follow the Coalition for Practically No Regulation in efforts to gut long-standing state and federal clean water law, go ahead and sue the state. However, if you want a clean Los Angeles River, healthy lakes at Echo Park and Machado Lake, and clean, safe, and healthy San Pedro and Santa Monica Bays, don't sue the state. If you want to demonstrate leadership in the region by supporting clean water protection and promoting all the great work the city is doing to clean up local polluted waters, don't sue the state. If you want to stand up to the current national trends to weaken every environmental protection and law out there, don't sue the state. The choice is clear. The city's long history of environmental leadership is at stake. Don't sue the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fleischle.
Thank you, Mr. President. Steve Fleischle, Executive Director of the Santa Monica Baykeeper. I'd like to echo the sentiments of Dr. Gold. I think everyone here would agree that they are supportive of clean water. But you have to ask yourself, when you're engaged in so much litigation over the issues over the last couple of years, when does being in favor of clean water really become opposed to clean water? Some of you might have seen the New York Times recently, as well as the Los Angeles Times. Federal judge rules city of Los Angeles violates clean water laws. LA Times. LA faces fines for sewer spills. The city spent $600,000 fighting litigation on the sewer system, only to find themselves in violation of the Clean Water Act anyway. The city of Los Angeles also sued the regional board on the Tillman permit and recently lost in the Court of Appeal at an expense of $500,000 at least for outside counsel. And most recently, the city of Los Angeles has lost their appeal on all grounds of the municipal stormwater permit. And now some folks want to ask you to escalate the level of disagreement and contention with the environmental community on water quality issues. We don't need an escalation in this context. We need leadership. And I appreciate the leadership that many of you have shown. In September, many of you wrote a letter to the governor requesting that the governor and his state water board dismiss the appeal. 6 of you were on the letter, and several other of you came up and spoke at the podium very thoughtfully about why this appeal was a bad idea. Well, the state board took your words to heart. They took the words of thousands of residents of California to heart, and they dismissed the appeals. They dismissed them without a hearing because they were meritless. They have ruled on this issue time and time again. As Dr. Gold mentioned, Long Beach has the same language, Ventura has the same language, San Diego has the same language, and in 1998, Orange County got that language during the Wilson administration. In terms of having a seat at the table, Leslie Mintz has mentioned that that issue has come up several times. I would like to echo that having a seat at this table is not going to do you any good. There is no way that this case is going to settle, particularly since we've all spent a year trying to negotiate. The Coalition for Practical Regulation is not interested in settlement, and without them, this case cannot settle. I would just urge you not to file a lawsuit. Again, don't escalate the problems that we have. We have so many issues that we need to solve. We need to settle the sewage case. We need to resolve the Tillman issues. And we need to move forward in terms of cleaning up the Los Angeles River, Ballona Creek, San Pedro Bay, and Santa Monica Bay. Thank you.
Mr. Dickerson.
Good morning, members of the council, Mr. President. I would like to just say very simply that fear is really driving this decision. Fear of really the unknown. And perhaps a little bit of background history might be helpful. This is not the first stormwater permit that's been issued to the city or to other cities in this region. In 1990, there was a permit. In 1996, that permit was renewed. And then again, this most recent permit was adopted just a short time ago. And up to this point in time, there has been no enforcement action imposed by the regional board at any point in time for the past roughly 12 years. That is a pretty good track record in terms of dispelling, I think, that fear that is out there. There is no imminent enforcement that's pending on this matter. With regard to the most recent permit, it does not contain numerical effluent limits. That is not a provision in the permit. It is BMP, best management practice driven. It is designed to be a very thoughtful, very rational, very progressive, moderate approach toward dealing with the stormwater pollution problem, one that allows us to work in partnership together to solve the problem. It uses language adopted by the State Water Board, which is being used by all the different state, or I should say regional permits that are adopted by the various regional boards for stormwater control. And so it's consistent in its language across the state. Now, we have an opportunity here for partnership to solve what is truly a very serious environmental problem and to avoid confrontation, and certainly to extend that confrontation that has existed. There's a trade magazine that is common amongst us in the field. It's Stormwater, called Stormwater, and it has many, many success stories about how cities and communities, counties all over the country are solving this particular problem, because it is pervasive in all urban areas. LA, I'm sad to say, is not a leader in this particular venue, this field. It's not even a follower. And this is really your chance to change that and to provide the direction to see some success stories in that magazine about what the City of LA is doing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes public comment for item number 28. Mr. Holden is next on the queue, but if we have the appropriate city attorney and department staff here, I'd ask that they come forward at this time.
Yeah.
And let me begin by asking the city attorney to address the question and request made by Councilmember Weiss about the extent to which we can have this conversation in open session versus recommending that the conversation be entertained in closed session. Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is the strong recommendation of our office that the entire discussion with staff be in closed session. Mr. Westhoff can explain the reason why it needs to be in closed session, but pursuant to the Brown Act, we are allowed to go into closed session concerning the matters that would prejudice the position of the local agency in litigation.
Okay, let's hear from Mr. Westhoff next, and then let's hear from members of the council specifically on the issue of open versus closed session. I imagine we'll entertain. Wait, hold on, Mr. Holden.
Yes,
Let me finish. And then we'll entertain a vote of the council in our desire to go, whether or not to go into closed session, and then proceed with a specific discussion on the substance of the matter. Mr. Westhoff.
Thank you. Good morning. Christopher Westhoff, Assistant City Attorney, Public Works General Counsel. Let me begin by stating that all of the discussions that have taken place about the potential settlement of the issues surrounding the existing stormwater permit were all conducted in private, confidential negotiations. I cannot tell you in open session what was discussed. I cannot tell you in open session the positions of the parties in those negotiations because they were conducted in private. They were conducted within a confidential setting. So it would certainly be inappropriate to discuss those in an open setting. Second of all, we would be unable to explain to you our strategy because then we would be making our strategy public rather than having a candid conversation with our clients, the City Council, in trying to reach a decision on whether or not the city should appeal this particular permit. Obviously, you can have a discussion of the facts from staff relative to what the impact of this permit will be, both from a technological standpoint and a financial standpoint, but any discussion about whether we should or should not litigate, about the strategy behind it, about the reasons behind it, and about where the settlement negotiations were, that needs to be conducted in closed session.
Mr. President, I'd like to ask a question. Mr. Westhoff.
Mr. Weiss, hold on a second. Mr. Weiss, you do not have the floor at this time. You had a chance to speak before we heard from members of the public. I have on the queue Mr. Holden, followed by Ms. Misikowski, yourself, Mr. Weiss, and Mr. Reyes. And again, members, I'll ask that we, at this point in time, contain our comments specific to the issue of whether or not to further discuss this in closed session versus open.
No, the city attorney's already ruled on that. It just said you can talk about the impact And so since we can talk about the impact, we have to talk about whether or not we should go open or closed session. That's not the matter before us. Only when we start talking about litigation. And so for that in mind, I want to hear from the department on the impact. As he said, she can discuss the impact, the effect of it, what it means, and the impact.
Then in practice, we're going to begin this dialogue in open session. Is there any objection to that, or do we need to vote on this? Members, do I hear any objection to going forward with this conversation in open session? Seeing none, Mr. Holden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to hear from the department.
Good morning. My name is Judy Wilson. I'm the director of the Bureau of Sanitation. And the Watershed Protection Division has the responsibility in our bureau to handle the stormwater program. With me today is Shahram Karagani, who's also head of the Watershed Protection Division. We had a very narrow issue on the stormwater permit. We are in support of the stormwater permit. We are in favor, obviously, of clean water, and we want to do everything we can to get there. Our issue is only one issue. Unlike many of the people who spoke to you earlier today, Coalition for Practical Regulation has many issues regarding this permit. The County of Public Works, Public Works, Los Angeles County, yesterday went to the Board of Supervisors, and there was a unanimous vote of the supervisors to sue the state over the permit. I wanted to share that information with you. I was called yesterday afternoon by Don Wolf, who's head up that program. They have several issues. One is the safe harbor language, which we're concerned about, the lack thereof. And they're also concerned that there's no standard for what they call MEP, maximum extent practicable language. Our concern is the lack of a safe harbor. Mr. Dickerson told you that this is our third stormwater permit. That's correct. The previous permits had safe harbor language in them, specifically and explicitly. And they stated that as long as we're in compliance with the programs in the permit, we're in compliance. Now, the impact, let me just get to the impact. We have a difficult time here explaining where we are without a closed session, but if the city attorney will let me get to the issue, I think we need to understand. What happens if in our receiving water report, which we'll have to give to this regional board, and we will give them data on the relative health of our various receiving waters, including Ballona Creek and LA River. I received a copy of a letter that the LA County Public Works Department received. They are the principal permittee on our stormwater permit. They had provided data on the LA River and Ballona Creek to the regional board, and it was clear that there were several exceedances of water quality standards. The letter they received from Mr. Dickerson was basically a warning letter indicating that the data evidenced an exceedance, and that's the type of situation that then triggers what's called an iterative process, where the executive director has total authority to determine what the permittees must do in order to achieve water quality standards. It's pretty much a carte blanche. How much he would expect us to do in this iterative process remains unknown. That's why it's very difficult to put a dollar sign on it, because it's really an open wallet that we have here. And we would be working with the regional board to improve water quality. How drastically they want us to improve remains unknown. And Chris, I don't know how much more I can say here on impact.
Well, let's see if I can articulate some of the potential impact. Without safe harbor language in the permit, we will be in violation of the receiving water language in the permit. If we are in violation of the receiving water language in the permit, we may be sued. And we can be sued by the state, we can be sued by the federal government, and we can be sued by constituents. Ultimately, receiving water language, if you don't meet the receiving water limits with best management practices, that leads to numeric limits in your water bodies in the LA River, Ballona Creek, and other storm drain channels, which ultimately leads, if you take it to its end game, to treatment of stormwater. And that is the potential financial impact of this stormwater permit if it is taken to its nth degree without having language in the permit, which presents the city with a safe harbor. So the potential financial impact goes all the way to treatment of stormwater in the LA River, Ballona Creek, and every other storm drain channel in the LA Basin. And that is the...
I'd like to add one more thing, too, because there seems to be some confusion about the total maximum daily loads, the TMDLs, and the stormwater permit. There are 33 stormwater-related TMDLs that are part of a consent decree between EPA and NRDC. And the schedule is to have all of these TMDLs adopted by the year 2013. So far, we have 3 adopted TMDLs, are all stormwater-related. One is low-flow diversions during dry weather, and the other 2 are trash TMDLs for Ballona Creek and LA River. The stormwater permit is the enforcement mechanism for the TMDLs. So as the TMDLs get adopted for stormwater, they become part of the permit. So there is a little bit of confusion there, and I wanted to also clarify that for you.
I believe his name is Mr. Fleischle.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to ask the gentleman a question. First question. If we do not meet the minimum standard of the clear water standard, would you sue us?
My position,
Could you answer that yes or no?
I would say, not in the foreseeable future.
All right. Have you ever sued any agency for not being in compliance before?
Yes, we've sued you guys on the sewage spills.
All right, fine. That's enough.
All right.
Mr. President, members, it's nice to come down here and say we are polluters and these people want to save the world. That's the contrast they draw about establishing what is our legacy of pollution compared to their legacy of clean air, clean water, drink the ocean water. And that's not what the facts are. The facts are, if we don't have a safe harbor language in this permit agreement, he'll do just what I ask him. They will sue us. And the technology does not provide for the best management practices that would accomplish what they set out for us to accomplish, the goal for clear water. It's just impractical at this point in time. The state of the art is not there. As it were, when we had the aerospace industry. When they say, let's put surveyor on the moon, let's put a man on the moon. They said the lowest responsive bidder. Sure, there were some flaws, but that's like the best management practices. It's not perfection. Mid-course maneuvers took place. You had to make changes as you traverse toward the moon. And the same thing here. We put out a bid that says, give me the lowest responsive bidder, not the perfected one. And so therefore, in this particular case, make it perfect or not at all. If you can't make it perfect, acknowledge the fact that it can't be perfect and put language in to protect the taxpayers of this city so that you don't have those frivolous lawsuits. And you open the door to frivolous lawsuits where the taxpayers will spend millions of dollars to make it perfect, so to speak, will cost $1 billion+ because we have to invent the equipment, which is not the responsibility of the taxpayers to do that. And so, Mr. President, members, I support filing this lawsuit, and the reason why, we have to protect our interests. We may settle later on, but if we don't file, the statute runs, the time runs. This is a timely issue, and they know that. You have to file the suit to protect your right to continue to negotiate. And failing to do that, you're out of the picture. You can't negotiate. You lose the ball game. You lose the war. The taxpayers are the one that lose. And any attorney who passed the bar anywhere ought to know that.
Mr. Holden?
You got to protect your rights.
And we've got to protect that microphone. Ms. Misikowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is an issue, and the reason I wanted it to be done in public session is because I think it's healthy. And I appreciate the presentations that were made by the environmental community who have been at the table with us, who have been attempted to be at the table with the other entities. This is a global issue as it has been presented because it's a global permit applied for on the regional basis. The Bureau of Sanitation, I don't think I'm saying anything I shouldn't, had a chart that they were able to pass out to each of us showing early in June and August of 2001 how many issues the city responded to in this permit. It's got some 12. In a draft permit in November, we were down to 10. In December of 2001, we were down to 5. The only issue contested by the city now remains one issue, this safe harbor. That may not be the same situation for the others in the Greater Coalition for Practical Regulation, which is a euphemistic name for all the cities and agencies that are part of this permit. Many of them have many other concerns, and there's no question, as they testified today, it is going to be costly to implement this. But the city has been willing to move forward. The city has taken some things on its own accord. And I think when Mr. Fleischle asked Mr. Holden, would you sue us under this one remaining issue, the safe harbor, the guarantee, he said not likely in the near future. I believe that because I think they have a sense of believing where the city is. As I see it today, we have three options. I disagreed with Leslie when she said, if you go in, if you sue and join this, you're going to be just dragged down with everybody else, and there's never going to be a settlement. And I'm not sure, Mr. City Attorney, if I can ask this. If we were part of the suit, is there the possibility that we could settle out separately? In other words, we have actions here all the time where there's multi-party suits, and you come in and say, we're going to settle this, or this entity is settled, and the rest of the suit goes on. One, can we carve out a place separately if we settle out, or if we are part of the suit, but then settle out early and perhaps set the standard for everybody else? That's one question. No. Two, if we don't do that, and take another option, which is to come in and ask for a separate permit all by ourselves, separate from anybody else, what risk and or cost is that? In other words, I believe that the city's position vis-a-vis the environmental community, vis-a-vis this permit, of achieving everything we want to achieve with one remainder issue can be achieved. Is the best strategy for achieving that being part of a global suit, settling soon, going for a separate permit, or doing nothing?
Councilwoman, I would feel a whole lot more comfortable articulating our options in closed session. I can give you a short answer to the question about whether we would be able to settle out. The answer to that would be no.
Why not?
Because this is a global permit. We are a sub-permittee to LA County. LA County is the prime permittee, and all of the cities in LA County are sub-permittees.
But couldn't we, as a global thing, get a sub-permittee or a direction in a settlement to go for a separate permit?
There was a discussion about an individual permit for the city of Los Angeles. That carries with it a number of costs that would increase by virtue of that, and a number of other issues that exist in the sense that our systems are completely integrated with LA County systems, so articulating a separate permit for the small portion of the city that is only the cities versus that portion of the storm drain system that is integrated, it's technically an untenable situation for the city to be in, and fiscally, I think Ms. Wilson can explain to you what the additional costs are. But again, I would be more than happy to expound on those issues.
We have a number on the cost, Ron can give that.
Mr. Westhoff, sooner or later, and the city recognizes, we are going to have large costs. We are going to have to implement something. It's going to cost us something. If there are incremental costs along the way that we have to assume now by way of doing something separately, we ought to know what that is. And again, the truth is, the sooner we do something as opposed to staying with everybody else, however we do it, in a lawsuit, settling out, or separately, we can't keep fighting this. We know that. We have our city legislative analyst looking at the issue of a bond. This is going to be big dollars long into the future. Let's start doing it now. But and then the question, as I said, the only strategy I want to know is, are we better off, more effectively able to be utilizing some of the tools and the power that we might have as part of a suit and finding a way to drive a settle out and give ourselves a timeline and say if no one else wants to come along, we will go separately.
Well, let me just, to answer the cost question, if I could, we're the co-permittee, the principal permittee being the county, and they do a lot of work on our behalf in terms of monitoring for the trash TMDL, in terms of public outreach. And the staff went through and identified all the work that the county does on our behalf as a principal permittee, and it's about $11.8 million a year, which we would have to take on ourselves. So it's a big issue. The other issue is really more of a planning and integrated plan approach. We, as you know, we're doing the integrated resources plan, and we need to work collaboratively with the county on a watershed basis. That's the preferred option. Long Beach does have its own permit. And they basically had sued and they had a settlement and they have their own permit. So it's possible to have your own permit. Is it advisable? It will be costly, and it may cost us in terms of doing integrated planning.
Thank you.
Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. President. And not to be too flippant about it, but one thing that I've taken out of the discussion so far is that the strongest argument people seem to find in favor of suing is we better sue because otherwise we might get sued. I mean, it's sort of nonsensical, and I don't want to put the city in that position where the city is leading the charge, fighting the environmental community. I mean, this is an opportunity today to partner with the environmental community, and you have heard the environmental community stand up at that lectern and tell you that they do not intend to sue the city if the city goes it alone, as indeed it should. And what if we sue? I mean, let's look at the recent record. What just happened in federal court a month ago? What did Judge Liu, a Republican judge, I will tell you, and a business lawyer before he became a judge, what did he do to the city? He threw the city out on its tail. And I have seen the legal submissions from the city to the federal court. How much did we spend on that lawsuit? $600,000 more?
Discuss that in open session.
How much we spent on the lawsuit? That's not privileged.
Councilman, I'm not going to discuss that lawsuit in open session.
How much we spent on the lawsuit?
You have my answer.
How much did we spend on the lawsuit? Hold my time. How much did we spend on that lawsuit? That's public information. The public has a right to know that information. How much did we spend on that lawsuit? If you won't answer, I'd like to ask the city attorney, Mr. Delgadillo, to come over and answer that question. I want to know how much we spent on that lawsuit.
Councilman, you know how much you appropriated in that lawsuit because it was brought to you for a discussion in closed session.
All right, so
and that is not what is before the city council on this issue. We'll be bringing the Baykeeper issue back to the city council.
You know, just tell us what the number is, if you wouldn't mind. If you don't know, tell us you'll find out.
I don't know what the total expenditure is. I do know what the city council has appropriated.
And what was that?
$600,000.
Okay, $600,000. For what? To get kicked in the teeth across the street in federal court. And we want to do it all over again? I don't think so. I will tell you this. Mr. Fleischle held up a letter a few moments ago that a number of us signed in September. And on the afternoon after council session, I want to tell you that I picked my daughter up from soccer practice. The afternoon we sent that letter. And she told me of a field trip that her 4th grade class took that day to the Tree People, where they learned about the problems of urban runoff. And she asked me, coincidentally on that day, what's the city council going to do to protect us in the future from this issue of stormwater pollution and urban runoff? On that very day, I decided I would tell her we're going to do something. And today is our chance to do it. It's our chance to make a difference. I move to reject the city attorney's recommendation here and not proceed with the lawsuit. And I encourage all of you to join me in that regard. Thank you, Mr. Garcetti, for the second.
Point of clarification, there is no recommendation on the table regarding future actions on this matter. We will discuss that in closed session unless informed otherwise.
Thank you. At this point, the chair recognizes Councilmember Reyes.
Then I move to not sue.
Okay, the chair recognizes Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. I'm trying to understand. The city has shown that it's concerned about the environment. A committee has been formed by many of the colleagues to deal with the wastewater as it impacts the river. We are moving in a direction where we need to continue to think about what happens to this region 5, 10, 15 years from now. I feel constrained here because there's questions I want to ask, but I don't want to make ourselves vulnerable in the future. And I believe the good-hearted people here that have come to the microphone won't sue us in the future. But there are over 30 million people in this basin. We probably have more of our fair share of attorneys in this area. And I do not know who is going to pick up that challenge to sue the city over issues that we cannot conceive it because no one has a crystal ball. So the questions I have, I'd like to direct them in closed session, is not to keep anything away from the public. I think our public record speaks for itself. We're trying hard to clean the river. We're trying hard to improve our areas. I speak from the fact that I have probably one of the most park-poor areas that lacks all of the amenities and open space issues and clean water issues that can be spoken to when you have 147 persons per acre. I dare to challenge anyone in this council or in this county to say we are not concerned about our environment. But we need to be responsible in our fiduciary responsibilities. We cannot be appealing to headlines, to the press in this discussion. We need to understand what is before us. So I know that it's been indicated that Long Beach, Ventura County, San Diego, Orange County has this language. I don't understand why we cannot, but I have a gut feeling there's some very intricate legal issues here that has evolved in this court process, and I need to know about them before I make that decision. So I'll stop here, but I strongly feel that the public needs to know that this body is trying its best to deal with environmental issues. Councilman Galanter has proven cases in Playa Vista, Bologna Creek, how we're doing with stormwater harvesting. We've been in the future in certain parts of our city, and now we have to figure out how we do it region-wide. So that should be the spirit of our discussion. It shouldn't be one in which we're posing ourselves to make headlines, to say that, yes, I'm the most environmentally friendly person. That is not what this is about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. The chair recognizes Councilmember Galanter.
Well, I'd like to echo some of that, but first I'd like to ask Chris if you would go through something for me again and see if I can make sure that I've understood it correctly. If I understood you correctly, if we don't participate in the appeal, we don't have the safe harbor language, correct?
Correct.
And if we don't have the safe harbor language, then we are automatically in violation of another piece of the permit?
You will be in violation of the water quality standards because the discharges that come off all of our streets do not meet water quality standards today.
So here's what I'm trying to understand. It sounds to me as if we're going to get sued by somebody either way. We're either going to be in a fight over the appeal, or we're going to be in a fight if we don't appeal and we have no safe harbor language. Somebody is going to come along and sue us and say, well, you're not in compliance with the other standards, and because we have no safe harbor, we will not be in compliance, and therefore we will be stuck in another lawsuit.
It will potentially expose the city to a great deal of liability if the water quality standards language remains in the permit without safe harbor language.
Without the safe harbor
Correct.
language. And that's the only issue that's left here for
That
us,
is the
right?
only issue that the city has agreed to comply with all of the terms and conditions of the permit that require all of the best management practices to be implemented.
Okay, wait, you're using my time here. And you can get more easily than I can. I want to say, members of the council, I think Mr. Reyes is right. These people may not be the ones who sue us, but there's plenty more waiting in the wings, and I can give you names and phone numbers if you want them. And I'm sure you already have many of them. The problem that faces us as a city is it's very difficult. I mean, I've been here a very long time, as you all point out to me over and over again. It's very difficult to get anybody to acknowledge the progress we've made And it has not always been easy to make that progress, and it's not going to be easy in the future either because it's always expensive, and it does require mobilizing ourselves to be vigilant within the city government to make sure that our departments and bureaus that have to do this stuff have the backing they need from the council and the nudging they need from the council in order to get done the things that need to be done. But I caution you once again, we had this experience with the Ballona wetlands where we cut deals with everybody. We got everybody's problems taken care of. And a whole new generation showed up and said, oh goody, we can sue. And they've been suing ever since. With respect to the watershed issue, there's a wonderful project that the Tree People and others, the county, the city, and the Army Corps of Engineers are working on, but it's going to take years to make it come to fruition that will actually allow us to keep water and take care of the water before it becomes stormwater, before it pours through the storm drains with all this stuff. We need the funding to be able to work on those things, not to be constantly responding to whoever it is who comes along that day and says, aha, gotcha, you're not at zero. I found styrofoam. I mean, you're always going to find it. I watch people pouring stuff into storm drains. We need to spend the money screening the storm drains and cleaning the storm drains. We clean a lot of them. We obviously need to clean more of them. But I really caution you, I know that soon you won't have to deal with me saying these things, but I really caution you, we need to be awfully careful about making our statements of commitment to the environment or anything else by putting the city in a position that's going to wind up costing the taxpayers a whole lot of money. There are very productive ways to be very environmental and to achieve really good environmental improvement results. But they're not making statements, they're actually producing things. And I think that we shouldn't be so worried about stating that we're environmental because we're going to get sued anyway. And we want to have the best protection for the city when we do get sued so that we can hang on to some of the money and use it for the purposes that we need it for. So I don't like any better than the rest of you being caught up with a whole bunch of other entities who object to many more things that we've already agreed to comply with. But that's kind of where we are, and we're just stuck with that. We either are going to protect our own residents and taxpayers, or we're not. And so I think, painful as it may be, and whatever the opposite of making a statement is, as it may be, I think we have to do this, and I'll try to figure out the answer to that question.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think as everybody's emotions on this knife edge get heated up, I think it's important for us for a moment to step back too, and because I think when we work hard on issues, we forget to do this, and to recognize, I think celebrate is probably too strong a word, but to recognize the great progress that we have made. I think that the Bureau of Sanitation has done an exemplary job, Public Works Board, and the environmental community in beginning to have a conversation. And I think the room that separates us right now is far, far less than it once did. And regardless of where we vote on this today, regardless of where this turns out, we should not let this be the death knell of that relationship and that progress. I think both sides need to make that commitment today. And us in between, I think it's very important. And we can all find a reason to be upset no matter how this goes, to say there's betrayal, but I think it's critical for us to lock in that relational progress. Secondly, I want to also praise that I think we have a Bureau of Sanitation, too, that when it comes down to what Councilmember Galanter was talking about, actually implementing this is going to be second to none, that understands that and who knows how to do this cleanup and is making great technical strides right now in making sure that what we all want in cleaner water is actually one day going to occur. That's really the true work that needs to be done, and that's the true work that is happening as we settle these other issues. My take on this is that this requires leadership, and leadership has risk. This is not about who's better on the environment. Everybody here cares about the environment. Everybody here has kids or relatives, and we care about making sure that when we go to the beach that they can play someplace clean. We can't paint ourselves either way as being against the environment. We can't paint ourselves either way, too, of not caring about taxpayer money. But I think the bottom line on this is one way or another, the people of Los Angeles are going to pay for this. The most cynical among us might say, well, let's get sued, lose it, and then we can finally raise some, without going to voters, some bonds. You know, that's one route of doing it. And others would say, let's get the federal government to pay for it, which is, again, our same residents, not through our fiscal system, but through another. Or we're going to have to go in a proactive way to voters to get this money. We have competing interests as residents and human beings here in Los Angeles. We want our money spent well, and we want clean water. And those two, we have to admit, each one of us to ourselves comes into conflict. The amount that a lawsuit might give to an environmental group is going to be pittance compared to the amount that it's going to be to clean up. So if you look at a lawsuit that we might lose, the main part of the settlement is going to go to the same place that bond money would go to, the same place that lawsuit bonds would go to as well. The bottom line is 90% of this stuff, if not 100%, is going to go to actually cleaning up the water. So the question then comes down to this for leadership. And if you'll allow me to extend my time for about 30 seconds. The question comes down to this for me. Do we take a leap of faith, one that requires us to go someplace that is less comfortable legally? And for me, it's not an issue of the practicality. I think that's convincing. If you're only concerned about fiscal stuff, I think there is a convincing argument that this lawsuit's going to go forward anyway. I don't believe, for many reasons, it's going to be resolved at the table. And if the lawsuit goes through, the appeal goes through rather, we benefit from that whether we have a lawyer at the table or not. But I don't want to go because of that reason. I want to not appeal for the right reason, which is to say today, and you can come back to me after environmental groups or individuals come back and sue the hell out of us and we lose it and we have to pay and say, I told you so. But I want to fundamentally appeal at this point in our relationship to making sure that we can show those who are the most likely suers and litigators that we are willing to turn a new page, that we are willing to take a different approach. And that's what leadership is about. It doesn't mean we'll never get sued by them. I was just talking with folks about it, but what it does mean is that we now representing the city will speak with a different majority voice saying we want to take a different route, we want to say that very clearly to the residents of Los Angeles because they want that, and how can we then work more together? It won't always be 100%, and that's why I would support Councilmember Weiss's motion, and I would urge my colleagues' support as well too, while praising the good work that the Bureau of Sanitation is doing.
Mr. Holden.
That speech really turned me on. Mr. Garcetti, it's really an affront to the people who represent us, these departments, to say that they don't care about cleaning up our runoff water during the storm, not the storm drain. That's really an outright insult, because they do care, so he's not listening. The fact of the matter is that since the appeal to the state board has been rejected, we have a certain number of days to protect the rights of the people of this city through the city attorney to file a lawsuit. Failing to do that, and it goes into effect, you are not in compliance, and the lawsuits will roll on and on and on, and the $600,000 that Mr. Weiss talked about is nothing but a drop in the bucket. And what kind of message he's going to give to his constituents, his taxpayers, about why they have to spend all this money to settle these lawsuits. God forbid that when we leave here that we get 8 guys who think like that. This city would be bankrupt. I know what your good feelings are. We're just as committed as you are. But don't vote with your eyes and ears closed. The fact of the matter is that the record is clear. The board would have settled with the city. But it's got to be a regional settlement. It's got to be the county and all the other cities. The board would have settled with the city. You have to listen to that. But the fact of the matter, since there is no regional agreement on the permit process, we're caught in the bag, and we're in the catch-22, where we have to protect our rights to be able to continue negotiation. If we fail to file a suit in a timely fashion, we lose that right. Is that right, Mr. City Attorney?
That's correct.
Now, what do we have to draw a picture for these guys for? One is talking over there, he doesn't care. One is talking over there, he doesn't care. He's going to vote to impose more money on the taxpayers of this city, because those are the facts. The fact is, you have a prescribed amount of time to file the appeal in court to protect your rights, and during that time, you can settle at any time. You can continue negotiation. I know that. I mean, I can't divulge everything to you today, but I've had conversation with those individuals that I've served with. and they will be responsive. They know the city wants to settle. They will give the city safe harbor. And these people back here know that. The fact of the matter is that we have to protect our right to be able to negotiate with the board that want to negotiate with us. But time constraint, we have to do it in a timely fashion. What's the last day we have to file the lawsuit?
Yeah, January 17th.
January when?
17th.
17th.
Well, we better get going. Now, it's in your hands. You're the newcomers. Vote to penalize the people of this city by using poor judgment and say no lawsuit, or you vote for the lawsuit to protect them. And I'm going to close and I won't push my button again. Before, years ago, we had the sewer system that needed to be improved. And the Environmental Protection Agency said, city, improve the sewer system. And they thumbed their nose up at them. This is the new board now. And then they sued us and won, so $5 billion had to be imposed on the ratepayers of this city to upgrade our sewer system. Do not do that all over again. We must protect our rights and the rights of the ratepayers in this city. Makes no sense to do otherwise.
Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. I have one question, and we can answer it now. Let's answer it later. If we're not part of the policy making with the county, does the city put itself in a disadvantage if it wants to do the kind of work that allows us to deal with the stormwater policies later that would be more creative and that would be different than what maybe the county might propose?
Let me see if I can talk around this in open
Hold
session.
my time, please.
The city was a moderating force in all discussions that took place over this permit. We were the middle ground, and we had a coalition that formed around that middle ground. That coalition ultimately broke up at the end of the discussions. I think the city is at a strong disadvantage if it is not at the table trying to formulate a solution to this problem. I think that being the second largest discharger in the entire region, to not have a seat at the table in those discussions puts the city at a disadvantage and ultimately puts the ultimate solution without any input from the city. I think, so without getting into specifics, that is.
So if recommendations came from the LA River Committee, where my colleagues came up with policy statements and or direction, would we make ourselves vulnerable and not being able to implement because we weren't part of that final policy discussion or debate if we're not part, if we're not at the table?
That's really difficult. It would depend on how it interwove with the stormwater permit or the TMDLs. Obviously, the city can go beyond what is required anytime it wishes to do so, and it can do things on its own that go above and beyond it, are not covered by the permit. But again, that's awfully difficult to articulate.
Councilman Reyes, to the extent that some of the creative ideas you may be suggesting would require some changes in the stormwater permit, and to the extent that potential settlement discussions would facilitate that, if we're not at the table, we probably would not be able to advance those. I can't be more specific in open session.
Right.
But again, the options, I think Councilmember Miskowski outlined some of the options for future action. To discuss those options more completely, we think would make more sense to do that in closed session.
Okay.
We can't disclose confidential discussions that occurred during the settlement negotiation, and that would touch on that.
I think, though, we can say in open session that the city was consciously pushing an environmentally friendly way to conclude the negotiation and really make sure we have clean water, but protect the city's legal issues. And we really were pushing for a very environmentally friendly approach to creating the safe harbor. And we almost got there. We were very close. That's why, unlike the previous speakers, I remain optimistic that if there were a court-ordered settlement, we could probably get there, I believe. We came very close to getting there.
Okay. Colleagues and members of the public, we are in a position where we cannot cripple ourselves from being able to be more creative and think out of the box as we deal with these very critical environmental issues. As we know, it's interconnected with many other social and physical issues and how the city continues to grow and or absorb growth. So I would hate to put ourselves in a position where we do not have that flexibility. But we need someone at the table, I believe, that can provide that envelope of space that gives us that mobility. So without getting more detail, I'd like to reserve my other questions for closed session. But the bottom line here is that we're working hard. We are working under the pressures of term limits. The issues we're engaging are infrastructural that have accumulated over decades. The changes that we are trying to implement will take decades to, I believe, actualize themselves. But if we do not set the stage now, if we do not start changing the environment and how we deal with the water issue and what's happening statewide, recent decisions on how water is now being deviated from Los Angeles, we need to come to grips with how we're being more creative in recycling our water. So we need to have that flexibility within the stormwater, TMDL, and all the other kinds of these margins of control and monitoring systems that could confine us in the future. That's my biggest fear, is that we are not provided the flexibility to do the necessary changes that we need to do in a region.
Ms. Miskowski.
I think the discussion has been healthy, but now to really help precipitate for the city some of the answers to the questions we've been asking, the city attorney has said they can't discuss in open session, but want to be able to share with us, that we now move to go into executive session with our staff on this matter to help us precipitate a decision.
Okay, you are the final speaker on the queue at this time. I second that. Mr. LeBlanc seconds. Is there any objection to entering closed session at this point in time? Seeing no objection, then in accordance with California law, the council will now adjourn into closed session for consideration of item number 28 from today's agenda. Guards, please clear the chambers. Welcome back into open session. Madam Clerk, the matter before us, please.
Mr. President, this is just to report that on item number 28, an action was taken in closed session.
Okay. Do we need a summary at this point, Mr. City Attorney? Madam Clerk? Okay. Then the next matter, please.
Wait, so there's not going to be a summary in public of the action taken? So the public's never going to know what we just voted to do?
Please.
No, I think it ought to be
Mr.
reported.
Weiss, please.
Goodbye, Ms. Galanter. It ought to be reported publicly.
Mr. City Attorney.
The council voted to approve the recommendation of the city attorney with conditions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, next matter, please.
That clears the desk, Mr. President.
Any announcements today? Members, do we have any announcements? Mr. LaBonge.
The mayor's office is coordinating a blood drive over at the Parker Center between 9 and 3. Blood drive for the American Red Cross, a very important thing for all those who could join in the effort, and salute those who do volunteer and help in the blood drive for the American Red Cross. Okay. Today and tomorrow, Parker Center, 9 to 3.
Any other announcements? Seeing none, please rise for adjourning motions. If we can have order in chambers, and if I can ask the public to please stand for adjourning motions. Ms. Galanter.
Thank you. I'd like to ask that we adjourn in memory of my friend Jane Halsman Bellow, who died the day before her birthday and 3 days before Christmas. She spent 6.5 years fighting melanoma, which has to be a record, but it gets you in the end. She's survived by her husband, Steve, her 2 daughters, Jen and Sophie, 1 grandchild, her mother, and her sister.
Thank you. Other tributes? Mr. Reyes.
Today we adjourn in the memory of Oscar Frank Villaseñor Sr. On January 3rd, Frank passed away after his long, hard-fought battle with cancer. Frank came to Los Angeles from Mexico in 1954. He was a loving family man. He worked hard all his life to support his family. Together with his wife, Rosa, he lived in Boyle Heights, where they raised his 2 sons, Oscar and Sergio, and his 2 daughters, Miriam and Patricia. Although Frank and Rosa had few resources at their disposal, together they made a good life for their children. Frank became the adopted grandfather to Brian and Kevin, the sons of a member of my staff, and took them into his home and heart as though they were his own grandchildren. Frank and Rosa fought alongside their neighbors in Boyle Heights and East Los Angeles against the East LA Prison, the Vernon Incinerator, the Whittier Boulevard Adult Bookstore, and numerous other quality of life issues. He made a lasting mark on the lives of his children and grandchildren, and he earned and respect and love of all that knew him. Frank is survived by his wife, Rosa, his children, Oscar, Sergio, Miriam, and Patricia, his daughters and sons-in-law, Lisa, Becky, Roman, and Jose, and his grandchildren, Sergio, Matthew, Sabrina, and Melissa Rose. Frank's son and daughter, Officer Sergio Villaseñor and Patricia Villaseñor, are members of our own city family. Oscar Frank Villaseñor Sr. will be missed by his family, friends, and all who knew him. Our deepest sympathies and support to the Villaseñor family. The rosary will be held at 7 p.m. Wednesday, January 8th, at Santa Isabel Church, 918 South Soda Street, and the funeral mass will be at 9 a.m. Thursday, also at Santa Isabel. I'd like to invite my colleague, Councilman Pacheco, to join me on this adjournment.
Mr. Pacheco.
Yes, Mr. President, I also want to join in and co-present an adjourning in honor of Mr. Villaseñor. His family is one of the families I actually grew up with. They were very active at San Isabel. Part of the tradition of Catholic churches in the neighborhood, Catholic schools, is that the families volunteer, the parents volunteer. Part of the fiestas, he was there, his family was there. Their children are great contributors to our community. His tragedy that he couldn't beat cancer, but we are all going to miss him. And I do want to join in adjourning in memory of Mr. Villaseñor.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. Retired Los Angeles Police Sergeant Andy Blodgett passed away January 3rd. Andy Blodgett was born September 1939. He was a member of the Los Angeles Police Department, last assigned to South Traffic Division. He was appointed to the police department in 1966 and retired November 2nd, 1991. Andy's nickname was Boxcar Blodgett because of his passion and love for trains. Andy was loved by everyone who knew him. He will be greatly missed, and I had the pleasure to work with Andy during my career with the LAPD. He leaves his sister, Phyllis, and brother, Phil. May he rest in peace.
Thank you, Mr. Zine. Members, I too have a request that we adjourn in memory of Luz Marina Rodriguez. Luz Marina Rodriguez was a resident of Studio City. Born in 1920 in Moron, Camagüey, she immigrated to Los Angeles in 1969 with her husband, Leoncio. She was a very simple woman, very loving and caring. She was a good wife and good mother, kept a very warm home, and was a great lover of mariachi music. And part of her legacy to this city and to this country is not just the recipes and the memories that she leaves behind, but many of us know her daughter, Rodri Rodriguez, who is the dreamer, someone who conceived and produces every year the Mariachi USA concerts at the Hollywood Bowl. She has certainly left her print on the city of Los Angeles and our country. I ask that we adjourn in her memory. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Thank you all very much. This meeting is adjourned.
You are watching LA City View, Channel 35. Your city, your channel.
We now join our scheduled program in progress.